Welcome back to Heal Me with Chocolate, the podcast where we talk about food, health, and how different foods affect our health. If this is something you're passionate about, we invite you to join our growing village. Let's go. Everybody has heard recently in the news, a couple of weeks ago, that we are banning all artificial colorings. And it started with red 3, now we went to red 40s and yellow 6. And what are those anyway, right? Well, those designations are given to the petroleum-based, but not always petroleum. Sometimes they are just colorings that made from natural sources, such as bugs. Sometimes, imagine that. We were eating bugs much earlier than World Economic Forum was promising us. So, different colorings that we use in food. Red 40 is the hue, the shade that was the most appealing. Yellow 5 and 6, blue 1, 2, and 3. Same thing. Hundreds of those colorings were developed and only a handful went into the food source, but all of them are coming from the sources that are cheap, but not always natural. So those colorings were discovered, developed over the course of early to mid 20th century, and usually as something like a textile dye or a dye for something non-edible. And then people thought, well, we have it. Why don't we make our food prettier, like Fruit Loops? Which is horrible, by the way. I would never feed that to my child. So the textile chemical dyes made its way to our food supply, and man, the havoc they've wreaked on our health. So now we see people are getting progressively more sick. We as a society develop more progressive chronic diseases. And we see a lot of health disparities, a lot of health detriments in our kids, which used not to be diagnosed so often and so in such quantities. So there was a famous Lancet study that linked the artificial dyes to ADHD and other attention deficiencies in kids. And I remember I even had an argument online with some mom in some Facebook group, which I highly do not recommend. When you see something inflammatory like this, when somebody says, oh no, there was no indication that artificial colorings do anything that adversely affect health. Well, in fact, they do. And the Lancet study is one of literally dozens upon dozens that has been published on the topic. And for whoever don't know how the classification of the clinical studies go or scientific journal, Lancet and New England Journal of Medicine are the highest impact medical journals. They usually publish the results of clinical trials, the pivotal phase 3 clinical trials. So when something is very, very far ahead in the scientific process, then you have high-end scientific journals such as Science and Nature, and all of their spin-off journals such as Nature Medicine, Nature Protocols. All of them are like the first tier below the clinical journals. And so if the study on food colorings affecting the attention spans in kids has been published in Lancet, that means that it's very, very impactful, well-researched study. And what does it say? Essentially, in a nutshell, it said that kids nowadays cannot focus on much because their health is getting attacked from food dyes anywhere they go. They want breakfast cereal has artificial dyes. They want a snack, chips, popcorn, or anything. Like, there is a certain amount of dye in everything. And even if you give them the vitamins, those chewy gummies, if you look at the label, you're going to have the entire rainbow of those colorings. So the kids' system and adults as well just can't get any break from the constant need of clearing out those colorings. And now, well, let's talk about other countries before we come back to the United States. Those colorings have been banned in majority of the world, including European Union, including Japan, and other countries that really value health and preventative health to begin with. And those colorings have been banned in Russia as well, and once again throughout the European Union, in the Middle East, in Israel, many places. But they have not been banned here. And why is that? Because a lot of the production, a lot of the less expensive and more profitable food manufacturing really relies on those colorings. And if you ask where are those colorings being used, it is nearly literally everywhere. So from meats to, once again, breakfast cereal, the meat should not look bright red on the shelf, because what happens once you start cutting meat, the heme in the hemoglobin starts getting oxidized and starts to look more brown, more towards like tuna color than the bright red meat. But in order to make it more appealing, they color it so it looks fresher, even though there is nothing wrong with freshness of the meat when it's dark red color or toward the brownish hue. Our fish getting colored. All the ultra-processed foods are getting colored. And I don't even need to tell you about confectionery products. Like every sprinkle, every frosting on any cake, if you don't specifically ask for natural plant-based colorings, very likely you're getting the artificial colorings that are affecting health. What else is caused by all of those different colorings? As an immunologist, I can tell you that red dyes are very closely associated with cancer and cancer development. So going back to red meat and how vilified and demonized it has been over the last several decades, well, has anybody thought that maybe it's not meat, but the coloring that's added to meat that's causing what they say colon cancer and all the different GI cancers? I don't think anybody has ever looked into that, but maybe it's something I also should brush up on PubMed, the compendium of entire human knowledge and science. Yellow colorings, yellow 5s and 6, are very often associated with asthma and allergy in kids, overreactive immune system, skin rashes of different kinds. Blues 1s and 2s, again, attention deficits, different kinds of allergic reaction, autoimmune reaction. So none of them are really good. And when we start making an argument that the dose makes the poison, and go back to the fact that it is in literally every food. Even in the food it's not supposed to be, like drinks and even Coca-Cola, it has caramel colorings. That, by the way, is a known carcinogen even in its own. So the caramels that are being made in industrial productions that go into as a fillers in the different chocolates and candies contain the caramel coloring as well. So once again, we are getting those attacks from all sides. Of course, at Sinless Treats Chocolate, we make candy too. But knowing as an immunologist what I know about the adverse health effects of artificial colorings. When I was initially imagining the recipes and imagining the candies and coming up with that, I was hell-bent into finding the way of coloring them with natural colorings. And I don't mean natural as of like derivative of bugs, for example, or any kind of bark that ancient people used to paint their faces, which those exist too, and we know about them. What I wanted to do is to go back to things that we know are good, because coloring in nature means health, means longevity. This is why we're drawn so strongly to brightly colored food. So what are the colorings? The colorings in fruits and vegetables and berries essentially shows how much nutrient content they have. Different colorings are different polyphenols, antioxidants, things that help our body create energy, make us healthier, make the building blocks of different systems. And so those are the colorings I was after. My main goal was to understand what can I do to capture the real polyphenols, the real phytonutrients that give colors to fruits, vegetables, and leafy greens. So through my experience being a medical scientist, working in different labs, I knew of a technology of a freeze dryer. We used it extensively in protein synthesis, in different drug discovery and development. And so I thought, we already freeze dry our organic whole plant stevia in chicory. We use the freeze dryers to remove the moisture from them and turn them into powder so we can put it in chocolate. Why don't we try to apply the same to the colorings? So the search for the best providers of the coloring started, and we've tried many different things. We've freeze-dried anything from beets and carrots and purple potatoes and sweet potatoes for orange, and different spices such as turmeric, and different berries such as blackcurrant, red currant, golden berries. We freeze-dried kale leaves, spinach leaves, for different hues of greens. We use spirulina for different hue of kind of blue-green, pushing it towards blue. So we freeze-dry different things and see how well they can retain their color and how we can then fuse it with cacao butter to give our chocolate such a bright coloring. For certain things like dark brown color, we didn't have to go far because cacao provides exact that color and we don't need to manufacture anything. So if you are a curious and very informed consumer, which I'm sure everybody in our audience are, you'll probably ask, well, what makes your blacks and whites? Right, because there is no things in nature that's completely black or completely white. And you would absolutely be right to ask that question. So there is a phenomenal detoxing agent that's called activated charcoal. And in a very small amounts, mixing it with cacao butter, it provides a perfect black color. And for the white, we use calcium carbonate, which is a mineral that is very often used as a supplement to build bonds. Once again, we use the same granite stones to encapsulate it in cacao butter that we always use, and we found a way to mix the colors to essentially give us every hue in the Pantone palette. So, with the entire industry needing to pivot now, we would really love to put it out there and say, if you're struggling to find a way to color your products in the most natural way possible, there are ways to do it, either in-house through vertical integration or through different companies who are doing very similar things that we are doing. The other thing that's really fun, was very fun for us, is to figure out the blue coloring. The blue coloring is one of the most difficult colors in nature, and in our color palette is the only color that does not come from fruits, vegetables, or leafy greens. It's a flower. We freeze dry the blue pea flower that gives us this dark sky blue kind of nice hue of the blue color, and then we mix it sometimes with yellow, sometimes with a little bit of green to get the different hues of the blue. But the blue was the most challenging color to create. Yet again, it's possible even without taking anything away from the original source material that you want to retain. So a lot of times people tell it doesn't really turn out the way, or they're oxidizing, or they turn out lighter or darker, and that is all true. The quest to find a really great, natural, unprocessed colorings is challenging. However, if you're producing food or you're thinking of your own CPG brands, we encourage you to reach out to us at sinless-chocolate.com to see if we can help you reach that goal and also improve the metabolic health of yourself and your potential customers. Next time, I would really like to talk more about sweeteners, natural sweeteners, artificial sweeteners. There was a video that was recently shared with me, and I would like to react to that. Why some sweeteners raise blood sugar level, why others don't. So if that is the topic that you are very curious about, come back next week and hear my reaction about that. Thank you for being with us today. In the meantime, check us out at sinless-chocolate.com, at our Instagram at sinless-chocolate, or visit our store at 5400 Bel Air Boulevard in Bel Air, Texas. And in the meantime, stay healthy.